Is your HOA always this fair paper slams on my workbench as a bright orange tow notice flaps under my truck's wiper. Our president rewrote rules at midnight, auto-denied appeals I never filed then, had my truck booted at dawn for sitting in my own driveway. But in court, Elena laid out timestamps, ledgers, and our lawsuit. The judge's gavel dropped fluorescent lights glaring while she froze every HOA account in the system. Next, I'll show you that first orange notice before their posted order ever got taped to the clubhouse door. The rooftop camera clicked before I even stepped out of the garage. A smooth mechanical pivot like a bird of prey turning its head. Its lens locked straight onto my driveway, onto my truck. My red contractor Ford sat exactly where it always sat, tires squared, not blocking a thing. But under the driver's side wiper, tucked like a threat, was a bright orange notice that didn't belong on anyone's windshield at 7 in the morning. Mr. Turner, Cynthia Hale called out, voice sharp enough to slice through the cold. "You're in violation!" Again. That word did something to the back of my neck. I walked over the frost, cracking under my boots, the fall air biting through my flannel. The garage behind me hummed softly, one bulb flickering above the tool bench where I'd been working since dawn. This was my rhythm, until they decided it wouldn't be. What violation, I asked, tugging the notice free. I followed every rule in your covenants. We tightened enforcement overnight, Cynthia said, folding her arms like it was a courtroom and not my front yard. It's all in the updated guidance. Updated. Overnight. Guidance. She said the word like it was a done deal. Behind her, Scott Liddell, property manager camera, always ready, quietly shifted his stance. He angled himself just enough to catch both me and the truck in frame like he was waiting to photograph a meltdown. I studied the notice. Across the bottom in a neat printed strip were the markings received. 0651, Arshanter 1207. My jaw set. Received at 6:51, I asked. Funny, this wasn't here at 6 when I walked out. Cynthia smiled without any warmth. Our system timestamps everything accurately. Yeah, I held the slip up, because this looks like someone stamped it at a desk, not when it was placed. Scott lifted his phone and snapped a picture the moment I said it. Across the street, the motion cam beeped again, another pivot, another click trained right on us. They had that thing tied into every corner of this neighborhood, recording every movement like we all worked for them. I folded the notice. Show me the updated rule. Cynthia opened her folder, flipping pages with theatrical precision. Section 12. Sub-Article 7. Overnight street visibility restrictions. My truck's not on the street, I said. It's in my driveway. Visible, she corrected, tapping the page. From the street. That's not what the covenants say. They do now. Behind her, sitting quiet on the flatbed of a tow truck parked half a block away, was a wheel boot yellow heavy ready to clamp onto anything with tires. Mini Cliff or not, the message was clear. They hadn't come for a conversation. Scott snapped another photo as I lowered the notice. So, let me get this straight, I said. You changed a rule overnight, didn't notify homeowners, then stamped a violation before sunrise, and now you're here taking pictures like I robbed a bank. It's documented, Cynthia replied. This, I held up the slip. This is sloppy. This received timestamp doesn't match the stories you're telling. Her lips tightened. Scott shifted again. You're escalating, she said. One more violation. We tow. Something cold slid into my chest, not fear, but recognition. A silent click in my brain like a tool locking into place. This wasn't enforcement. This was targeting. The neighborhood wasn't stupid. Curtains shifted. Doors cracked open. People watched from porches pretending to be checking their mail, their trash bins, their pets, anything to avoid being part of this but not willing to miss the show. I rested my hand on the cold steel of my truck door. That truck had carried my entire career. Every tool I trusted lived in that bed. Every job I'd driven to every long day, every hard-earned dollar, they all ran through this machine. A camera across the street beeped again and rotated toward me like it had orders. Cynthia leaned toward Scott and whispered just low enough she thought I wouldn't hear, "Make sure he gets the next notice tonight." Scott nodded, already raising his phone. I looked straight at them, straight at the camera, straight at the neighbors watching through blinds. You don't tow a man's truck unless you want to fight. The clank hit the air hard enough to rattle my teeth. I stepped out onto the driveway just in time to see a tow driver crouched at my front wheel, locking a bright yellow boot onto the rim. The street lamp above us flickered, throwing long shadows across the cold pavement. My breath fogged in the air. It was 5:12 a.m. "Hold on," I said, walking toward him. "What are you doing?" He didn't look up. "Work order from Maple Ridge HOA," he muttered, tightening the last bolt. "These things don't go on by themselves." "That's my point," I said. "This is my driveway." He finally stood, wiping his hands on a faded jacket. He looked tired, not hostile, like a man who'd already had a long morning. "They've been towing a lot lately," he said under his breath. "Fees look crazy. Something's going on." Behind him, Scott Liddell stood with a tablet tucked under his arm and a smug tilt to his chin. He wasn't even pretending to help. He was watching, observing, making sure this moment landed the way they wanted. "Scott," I said. "Explain." "System auto-flagged you," he replied. "Multiple violations. It's all automated." "Automated," I repeated. "Funny, because my phone hasn't delivered a single notice from you." He shrugged like it wasn't his problem. "We can't control your settings." I pulled out my phone, opened the HOA app. No warnings, no flags, no messages. Not a single notification. "Show me the list," I said. Scott tapped his tablet. "Confidential," he said quickly, "but it's accurate." The tow driver leaned closer to me. "Look," he whispered, "between you and me, they're pushing us for volume. Weekly quotas. None of this feels right." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Elena Brooks. I stepped back and answered. "Lena, something's going on." Her voice came sharp and awake even at this hour. "Take pictures, every angle. Boot timestamp tow truck." "Scott, everything. Then meet me at the diner at 9. I looked at the tow driver. "Can I walk around the truck?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll give you space." I took photos, the boot clamped tight, the frost melting under its metal grip, the tow truck idling nearby, Scott's reflection in the chrome bumper. The whole scene felt staged, too ready, too coordinated. My phone buzzed again. HOA, appeal, decision. Denied timestamp 03:17 a.m. I hadn't filed an appeal. I opened the email. It read, "Your appeal for violation 12:07 has been reviewed and denied. Further violations will result in towing." My jaw clenched. "Scott," I said, holding up the screen. "What is this automated processing?" he said. "Nothing personal. It denied an appeal. I didn't file," I said. He shrugged again. "System must have assumed you would." The tow driver shook his head slowly. "That's not normal. None of this is." I felt the cold in my chest now, not from the air, from something deeper, something twisting, something planned. By the time 9 o'clock hit, I'd taken 50 photos. My hands still smelled like cold metal and anger. The diner door chimed as I stepped inside. Morning light washed across the counter, catching the chrome coffee machines and laminated menus that had been there longer than any HOA board member. A couple of truckers sat near the window boots, muddy jackets warned my people. Elena sat in a booth near the back, hair pulled into a sharp ponytail blazer, immaculate. She had 3 folders spread out in front of her and a mug steaming between her hands. I slid into the seat. What am I looking at? She didn't waste time. "Jack, this is a revenue scheme." My stomach dropped. "Say it straight." She pushed a folder toward me. "The new violation structure funnels more fees through a third-party vendor. That vendor gets a cut of the fines. Pressure goes up, violations go up, towing goes up. That explains the boot at dawn," I growled. "And the 03:17 a.m. denial," she added. "They're generating paperwork before homeowners even see the violations." Steam lifted from her mug. I watched it curl upward like smoke off something burning. "Elena," I said quietly, "this is fraud." She didn't disagree. Instead, she reached down, grabbed the last folder, and dropped it on the table. The weight of it thudded against the wood. On the cover, HOA, Vendor Activity, Irregular Payments. I opened it and felt the diner tilt under me. Rows of payouts, duplicated entries, late-night timestamps, round number transfers with no descriptions. "This is just the start," Elena said. "We're going to dig deeper." I looked through the pages, each one worse than the last. Finally, I set the folder down and leaned back. "If they bend the rules at 3 a.m., I said, voice steadying, "they'll break them at noon." Elena nodded. "They already have." "Then let's hit back," I said, "legally." Her eyes sharpened. "Good," she said, "because this time they picked the wrong truck." The envelopes were waiting like a trap, 3 of them stacked together in my mailbox, all with the same pale blue HOA logo in the corner and the same thin, sharp edge that sliced at my fingers when I pulled them out. It was late afternoon in Maple Ridge. The sun hit the row of community mailboxes at just the right angle to turn the metal doors into mirrors. Above us, a camera clicked, adjusting its lens, sweeping across the cul-de-sac like it had a list. I flipped the first envelope over. Maple Ridge, HOA. Notice of violation. The second. Same thing. The third. Same thing. All 3 had identical barcodes along the bottom and in small dark print near the stamp, generated A1432. 3 at once, a voice said behind me. "That's not a mistake." I turned to see Tom Keller shuffling over mail in his hand jacket, half-zipped reading glasses hanging from his neck. He'd lived here longer than I had, long enough to see patterns before anyone else. "You get any?" I asked. He held up a lone grocery flyer. "Not this time. But they did the same thing to the Sullivans last year. No warnings, just a stack." Same day, same timestamp. I tore one envelope open right there. Violation, VR12-07. Visibility from street violation. Date, yesterday, notice, Generation 1432. Response deadline, 48 hours from received. My jaw tightened. The second letter said the exact same thing. Different incident time, same generation timestamp, same language. Third, identical. The HOA bulletin board across from us had a fresh sheet pinned up with crooked pushpins, parking crackdown, protecting property values. Underneath another line, enforcement will be strict and consistent. The camera above the board gave another audible click like it was nodding along. "This isn't consistent," I said. "It's staged." Tom lowered his voice. "The Sullivans moved within 6 months. Sold low. HOA bragged about stabilizing standards after they left." I slipped the letters back into my hand and took a breath. "Tom," I said slowly, "would you be willing to say that on record if this goes legal?" He swallowed, looked at the board, looked at the camera, looked back at me. "I'll tell the truth," he said. "Just don't make me the front page." My phone buzzed. "Elena." "Open them all," she said before I even said hello. "Tell me the generation time. 1432. All 3. "That's batching," she said flatly. "Batching notices isn't accidental, Jack. It's a process." "I thought that," I said. "Tom says they did the same to the Sullivans." "Good," she said. "We're going to use that. Come home and plug your dash cam in. I want to see the overnight footage from the first notice." I headed back up the sidewalk, the letters crinkling in my fist. The new motion light the HOA had installed on the lamppost at the corner snapped on as I passed, even though it wasn't dark yet. It glared straight onto my driveway like a spotlight. The boot marks were still visible on my front wheel from that morning, little scars in the dust where the metal had bitten. Inside, I pulled the dash cam off the windshield and connected it to my laptop on the workbench. The familiar smell of oil and cold steel grounded me more than anything else had that day. Elena's voice echoed from the phone on speaker. "Scroll back to the night before the first orange tag," she said. "Look for anything past 3 a.m. I sped through the playback. Hours of stillness. The truck sitting quiet. Occasional headlights gliding past. Then at 3:10 a.m., movement. Scott in a hooded jacket walking up my driveway. No clipboard, no body cam. Just a folded orange notice in his hand. He looked around once quick, then slid the paper under my wiper, patted it like it was a done job, and walked off. I paused the frame so his face sat in the center of the screen. "Got him," I said. "Good," Elena replied. "Screenshot. Save 2 copies. 1 untouched. 1 you can annotate later." I took the shots, labeled them with the exact timestamp. Outside, the new motion light flicked on again, washing the driveway in harsh white. A second notification hit my phone. HOA Appeal. Decision denied, timestamp 1508. I hadn't filed an appeal for any of these new notices. "Elena," I said, picking up the phone again, "I just got another denial for an appeal I didn't make." "Forward it," she said. I did. I heard her keyboard as she opened it. Same language as the 0317 email. They're using a template, just swapping violation numbers and time-stamping the decision before anyone even complains, I said. "Exactly," she replied. "Their manufacturing process, paper trail without the actual trail." I went back to the letters, reading the fine print. At the bottom of each notice, generated automatically. Disputes must be filed within 24 hours of received. Appeals may be denied without further review. "Jack," Elena said, "you remember what I told you at the diner?" "That this is a revenue scheme," I said. She exhaled. "I'm upgrading my language." Meaning, this isn't just aggressive billing anymore, it's administrative fraud. They're using timestamps and batch processing to create the illusion of due process. That's a different animal in court. I looked at the frozen image of Scott on my laptop screen, his hand on my wiper at 3:10 a.m., while somewhere in the system a script was stamping generated 1432 and appeal denied 0317 on documents I never saw. Outside, the HOA's new motion light flicked on again, bright enough to wash out the kitchen. I walked to the window. The beam was angled perfectly straight across my driveway, straight up the hood of my truck, straight to the spot where the boot had been. They wanted it lit. They wanted it watched. They wanted it documented their way. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't email. It was a push alert from the HOA app, one I hadn't seen before. Imminent. Tow. 30 minutes. I stared at it, reading the words twice, my reflection faint in the glass. "If they control the clock," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone, "they control the truth." Then I grabbed my keys, my phone, and every printed notice I had. If they wanted to play with time, we were about to drag the whole thing into daylight. The projector sounded like a distant generator, low and steady as it warmed up. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the elementary school gym, washing the room in that washed-out yellow that made everybody look a little more tired, a little more suspicious. Folding chairs squeaked as people shifted. Phones were already out, some filming, some pretending they weren't. At the front, on a portable stage, the HOA seal was taped onto the podium like an official stamp on a cheap envelope. Cynthia Hale stood behind it in a navy blazer, papers stacked neatly, smile set to authority. Tonight, she began voice carrying through the PA system. We addressed Mr. Turner's repeated violations. There it was. No pretense, no concerned neighbor, just a name under a spotlight. I sat halfway back next to Elena Dashcam on the floor by my boots folder of printouts in my lap. She leaned in, voice low. "Facts first," she murmured. "Timestamps second. Don't rush." I nodded, eyes locked on the stage. Cynthia clicked a remote. The projector threw the first slide onto the screen, a photo of my red truck orange notice pinned under the wiper angle chosen to make it look like it was jutting into the entire neighborhood. "Here," she said, "you can all see the clear visibility issue." Section 12. Sub-Article 7 requires that non-garaged vehicles not create visual clutter from the street. A couple of heads nodded. Some didn't. She clicked again. Same truck, different day, same orange notice. Another slide. Another one. Each labeled in the corner, violation Theater 12-07, date, different. Generated 1432. Despite multiple warnings, Cynthia went on, Mr. Turner chose not to comply. Our system documented each incident exactly the same way for consistency. Elena's fingers tightened around her pen. There's the opening, she whispered. She just committed to exactly the same way. Remember that. I stood when Cynthia paused to shuffle her papers. May I respond? I called out. Murmurs moved through the rows. A few people shifted their phones to record more directly. Cynthia hesitated, then gave a tight smile. You'll have a chance. Yes, she said, after I finish. She moved through a few more slides. Charts now. A line showing rising violations. A red block labeled risk to property values that seemed to be conveniently my section of the block. This pattern, she said, requires firm action. Show the times, I called out. If it's such a pattern. She glanced at me, irritated, but clicked back to one of the images. The generation time is visible in the bottom right, she said. 1432. On all of them, I said. Every single one. That's how the system works, she snapped. Batch processing. Elena stood now, too. Cynthia, she said politely, if you're comfortable presenting those as official, I'm sure you're comfortable hearing about some other timestamps. Several residents turned in their seats to look at Elena. Some recognized her from the diner from the post office from around town. Word travels faster than memos in a place like this. Cynthia stiffened. And you are Elena Brooks, she said. Jack's counsel. That word counsel changed the temperature in the room. Scott shifted his weight near the side wall. Treasurer Mark, sitting on the front row with a notebook, stopped tapping his pen. Fine, Cynthia said. Mr. Turner, you have 5 minutes. I only need 3, I answered, picking up the dash cam in my folder. As I walked to the front, the projector flickered briefly across my hands, turning the edges of my papers pale. I plugged the dash cam feed into the laptop they'd set up for the slideshow. The screen behind me went black, then shifted into a still frame of my driveway at night. Here's what your slides leave out, I said. I hit play. The gym watched my truck sitting quietly under a street lamp. Timestamp at the bottom, 03/08/12. The room was still. A few kids squirmed in their chairs. Then, at 03/10/03, a figure walked into frame. Scott, hooded jacket, orange paper in hand. He looked around once, then walked straight to my truck, lifted the wiper, tucked the notice under it, patted it like a signature, and walked away. I paused the frame with him, frozen there, mid-step. Your notice says generated at 14:32, I said. Your appeal denial says 03:17 a.m. Your property manager is on camera placing the notice at 3:10 a.m. Can your system bend time, or is this human? The murmurs weren't low anymore. People were shifting forward in their seats. A phone chimed as someone texted the clip to someone else. Cynthia's voice cracked slightly. You don't have context for Elena, I said, stepping back. She walked up calmly, setting her own folder on the podium. I pulled the metadata from those emails and notices she said. They were all created at 02:04 a.m., batched together before a single piece of paper touched a windshield. That's not enforcement. That's pre-writing history. She flipped open the folder just enough for the front row to see. Unfamiliar numbers tables and column headers winked back at them. This ledger, she continued, shows multiple payments to your towing vendor in the same week for the same invoice at odd hours. I'm not going to bore everyone with accounting tonight, but I think one question is fair. She looked at the crowd, then right at Mark. Why, she asked, did the HOA pay the vendor twice? That broke something in the room. A woman in the middle row raised her voice. Is that true, Mark? A man I recognized from 3 houses down added, Are we paying for them to harass our neighbors? Chairs screeched as people stood to get a clearer view. Cameras switched from Cynthia to Elena to me to the screen and back again. The gym felt suddenly too small. Cynthia's composure slipped. This is an ambush, she snapped. You manipulated data, Jack. You're cherry-picking images and times to make us look like villains. I reached into my folder and held up a printout. This, I said, is the email that denied my appeal at 03:17 a.m., an appeal I never filed. I enlarged the view on the projector. HOA, appeal decision, denied timestamp 0317, reason, insufficient grounds. 317, I said slowly. Dashcam puts your guy at my truck at 310. These notices say generated at 1432. Your appeal process is happening before reality. If my truck breaks rules, why do your timestamps break time? For a moment, the only sound was the faint whir of the projector fan. Then, the room erupted. People spoke over each other. That's not legal. Did you do this to us too? I got one of those auto denials. Someone near the aisle said the word out loud for the first time. Sounds like fraud to me. Elena leaned toward the microphone just enough. At minimum, she said it's administrative misconduct. And if these ledgers are what they look like, this doesn't stop with Jack. All eyes shifted almost in unison to Treasurer Mark. He'd gone pale. His pen lay forgotten on the seat beside him. Someone behind him, not bothering to whisper, said one word that landed like a gavel: audit. Mark's shoulders tightened. He grabbed his notebook with a clumsy hand, avoided everyone's eyes, and stood up so fast his chair folded halfway. Without a word, he headed for the side door, pushing it open and disappearing into the dim hallway. The door swung closed behind him with a hollow thud that echoed through the gym. Elena was waiting before I even shut off the engine. She stood in the post office parking lot, one hand gripping a thick folder, the other shoved into her coat pocket against the cold. When I stepped out, she lifted the folder just enough for me to see the weight of it. "Today, we dig," she said. The morning air was sharp, one of those high-altitude Colorado mornings where your breath hangs longer than it should. A postal truck rumbled past us, brakes squealing. The town was waking up, but the tension in her voice made everything feel muted. We walked inside. The lobby smelled like cardboard and old receipts. A couple of retired men in denim jackets waited in line, leaning on the counter like it was the only sturdy thing left in their days. Elena didn't wait. She approached the clerk's window. "Certified mail logs and HOA bulk records for Maple Ridge," she said. "Pulled from the archive yesterday." The clerk recognized her. "Right. Hold on." While he disappeared behind the swinging door, Elena whispered, "If towing's dirty, the books will be worse." He returned with a tray full of thick envelopes and a small plastic box. "Outgoing, incoming, and bulk logs. Sign here." We took everything to a side counter under the community bulletin board: yard sales, lost pets, and the HOA's own parking crackdown flyer curling at the edges. Elena opened the first envelope, flipping through stamped manifests. "Look at this," she said. "No mailed updates, no policy change, no warnings. So the new rule never went out," I said. "No," she replied. "They went straight to violations." We copied what we needed and stepped back outside. The cold felt different now, sharper, like the air knew something we didn't. "County records," she said, already heading to her car. The building sat across from the courthouse, humming with fluorescent light. Inside, the clerk at the front desk looked up, recognized Elena, and nodded. "You're back," she said. "For ledgers, reimbursements, and system logs," Elena replied. The clerk disappeared into a filing room, and while she was gone, someone else stepped into the lobby. Mark, treasurer of the HOA, keeper of the books. He froze when he saw me like an animal caught in a spotlight. His eyes darted to Elena's folder, then to the counter, then back to me. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. He swallowed. "Didn't expect to run into you. We're following up," Elena said, "on your filings." He muttered something about having another meeting and slipped out a side door so quickly he didn't bother with a goodbye. When the clerk returned, she set down 3 folders and a thin blue binder. "Ledgers, vendor agreements," she said. "And these are the HOA system change logs." Elena's eyes sharpened. "Change logs. They show who edited what the clerk said, and when." We carried everything to another table. Elena opened the ledger first. Column after column of dates and amounts, at first glance ordinary. Then her pen stopped. "Here," she said. 2 payouts for the same invoice number." I leaned over. "Same vendor, same description, same week." "That's a double dip," I said. She flipped the page. "And here's another one. A week later, another pair of charges, 2 entries, identical amounts, identical coding." "This isn't accounting sloppiness," she said. "This is purpose." I felt my jaw tighten. "And my truck is the excuse they're using to feed it." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We opened the system log binder. Midnight timestamps filled entire rows. 0037, modify violation schedule. 0041, update, appeal, template. 0052, adjust enforcement category. So, while the rest of the neighborhood sleeps, Elena said they're rewriting the rules. "And applying them retroactively," I added. She nodded. "That's what makes it misconduct." From another folder, she pulled a stack of reimbursement slips. Most were signed by Mark. One was stapled to a receipt from a steakhouse for entrees, wine, dessert. This, she said, is labeled enforcement expenses. "That's not towing," I replied. "No," she said. "It's personal spending on HOA funds." Another slip showed hotel charges. Another gas and tolls. All vague. All coded under enforcement. I picked up one of the forms. Thin paper, the cheap kind that curls if you hold it too long. "It's almost like they knew nobody would ever look," I said. "That's why we're looking now," she replied. At the bottom of the last folder was a folded sticky note. Elena lifted it carefully. Block letters. "Ask the bank about the ACH irregularities." She exhaled slowly. "Someone inside wants this exposed." "Can the bank talk to us?" I asked. "With probable cause," she said, "and this is close." We stepped back to the desk. The clerk waited, hands tucked into her sweater sleeves. "I forwarded some of your earlier pulls to the bank," she said. "Routine procedure when there are duplicate payments." Elena stiffened. "And the rep called back while you were in the file room," the clerk said. "He wants your case file." When Elena asked. "Tomorrow." Elena looked at me. Then the folder in her hands heavier than it had been in the morning. "This isn't just towing," she said quietly. "This is the whole operation." I nodded once. "And tomorrow," she added, "we open the next door." The recorder clicked on before anyone spoke. A sharp metallic sound from the clerk's desk followed by the red light blinking to life. Judge Caldwell stepped through the side door robe settling around her as she took her seat on the bench. "Calling case 23447, the clerk announced. "Turner versus Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." I stood automatically, hands tight at my sides. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, like every argument anyone ever lost in this room still lingered in the grooves of the benches. When we sat again, Elena leaned slightly toward me. "Stay steady," she whispered. "Let them sink in their own numbers." Across the aisle, Cynthia Hale looked wound tight enough to snap. Her blazer was pressed hair perfect, but her eyes tracked the bank representative at the far table with suspicion. Scott sat rigid beside her, and Treasurer Mark kept rubbing the side of his neck like he was trying to erase a bruise only he could feel. Judge Caldwell adjusted her glasses. "We're here on the plaintiff's request for an injunctive freeze of the HOA's financial accounts. Miss Brooks, you may proceed." Elena stood with a calmness I envied. "Your Honor, my client has been targeted through falsified enforcement, backdated notices, automated denials for appeals he never filed, and violation timestamps that contradict video evidence. The financial records suggest these actions are part of a broader pattern. We're requesting the court freeze accounts to prevent further misuse." Cynthia shot to her feet. "Your Honor, that is completely Mrs. Hale," the judge said, not raising her voice. "You will sit until it is your turn." Cynthia sat, lips pressed into a hard line. Elena clicked the remote in her hand. The screen beside the bench lit up with the first slide, a still frame of Scott slipping a notice under my wiper at 3:10 a.m. "This is Exhibit A," she said. "Dashcam footage." Yet the HOA system claims the notice was generated at 2:32 p.m. and that an appeal never filed was denied at 3:17 a.m. the same morning. Those timestamps cannot coexist. The judge examined the still image. "Mr. Liddell, is that you, Scott?" swallowed. "Looks like me, yes. But the system." "We'll address the system in a moment," the judge said. Elena switched to the ledger screen. Duplicate payments in identical amounts side by side. Exhibit B, she said. 2 payouts for the same service, same invoice number, same vendor. Paid days apart. Treasurer, Mark's face blanched. Elena crossed her arms lightly. Mr. Harris, would you like to explain why the association paid the same bill twice? Mark stuttered. Those must have been mistake entries. By whom? The judge asked. He opened and closed his mouth, but said nothing. The bank rep cleared his throat. Your Honor, if I may clarify. Please. We reviewed ACH activity for Maple Ridge HOA. The split transactions Ms. Brooks references are consistent with known patterns of vendor kickbacks, round numbers, non-itemized descriptions, and transfers spaced in narrow windows. Cynthia jerked forward in her chair. Kickbacks. That's a serious accusation. Our vendor operates completely above Mrs. Hale, the judge repeated. You are not helping yourself. Elena clicked to the system logs bars of text usernames and timestamps. Exhibit C, she said. These are internal logs showing changes to 812.07. The parking rule made at 12:37 a.m., 3 days before the first wave of notices. No email, no mailer, no bulletin update. Yet homeowners were penalized under the new text immediately. The judge looked over the sheet carefully. And these edits were done by you, she asked Mark. His throat worked. I update things occasionally. It's part of the back-end work. At 12:37 a.m., the judge asked. He flinched. I work late sometimes. That is not in dispute, she said. The problem is that you appear to be altering enforcement criteria without informing homeowners and then issuing penalties based on those altered criteria. The room tightened. You could feel the air shift like everyone suddenly realized the floor was tilting. Elena displayed a reimbursement form next. Exhibit D charges labeled Enforcement Expenses. Restaurant bills, hotel nights, fuel charges, all approved under Mr. Harris's signature. Cynthia gave a thin laugh, the kind that cracks before it forms. Those were legitimate Mrs. Hale. The judge cut in, unless you're prepared to testify under oath that these steak dinners were part of official enforcement, I suggest you stop interrupting. A ripple of murmurs passed through the rows of residents. Phones were raised recording. I recognized faces neighbors who hadn't met my eyes 2 weeks ago are leaning forward, hungry for answers. Elena stepped to the final page. Your Honor, what we're asking is simple. Pause the money. Don't let funds be spent until we know what's real and what's fabricated. Judge Caldwell looked at the bank rep. Your independent findings support this request. Yes, he said without hesitation. There are anomalies significant enough that our compliance department initiated an internal review. We defer to the court on further action. The judge straightened a pile of papers, then looked down at us. The courtroom went silent, the kind of silence you feel in your chest. Mrs. Hale, she said slowly, this association has failed to provide a coherent explanation for duplicate payments, midnight adjustments, or contradictory timestamps. The plaintiff has provided evidence suggesting improper or deceptive financial activity. Cynthia's hands trembled on the table. Judge Caldwell picked up her pen. Based on Attorney Brooks's motion and supporting exhibits, she said, voice steady and clear, this court grants the requested freeze. Effective immediately, all Maple Ridge HOA accounts are hereby frozen pending investigation. No further transactions may occur without court approval. It hit the room like a shockwave. Cynthia's shoulders collapsed. Scott stared at the table as if afraid to meet anyone's eyes. Mark looked physically ill. Behind us, someone whispered. They froze. Everything bailiff the judge said. Prepare the written order. Serve all parties today. The recorder clicked off. The judge exited through her door. Chairs scraped. Voices surged. In the hallway outside, the bailiff approached Cynthia first, handing her the single-page document with the county seal stamped at the top. Order, account hold. Based on motion, filed by Attorney Brooks. A reporter stepped toward me, microphone raised. Mr. Turner, she asked, breath visible in the cold air from the open courthouse doors. Is it true? Your attorney just froze the entire HOA? I met her eyes, then glanced at Elena standing beside me. You tried towing my truck, I said. My attorney froze your whole budget. HOA emails started pouring in before sunrise. My phone buzzed on the workbench while I tightened a bolt on the front grille. When I glanced over, the subject line froze me. Temporary suspension of all fees. Effective immediately. I opened it. No apology, no explanation. Just a single paragraph saying all assessment citations, late fees, and towing-related charges were paused pending internal review. Elena called 30 seconds later. Give it hours, she said. Cynthia's done. I looked at my truck. Fresh coat, washed chrome. Restored all the boots and stickers gone. For the first time in weeks, it looked like itself again. My garage door was half open. Autumn sunlight spilled onto the concrete, turning the dust in the air gold. The neighborhood felt quieter than it had in months, but it didn't last. Within an hour, people began showing up. At first, it was Tom standing at the edge of my driveway with his hands shoved in his pockets. You saw the email, he asked. Oh, I saw it, I said. Freeze must have hit harder than they expected. Then 2 more neighbors came. Then 5. Then a small crowd. Folks who had kept their distance during the mess now stood close, clutching printed notices and old penalty letters like they were holding proof of their own guilt. A woman I recognized from 3 houses down stepped forward. She was in her 70s, shoulders hunched, a stack of yellow envelopes in her hand. They fined me over $2,000, she said, voice shaking. Said I didn't trim my hedges, but I never got the first notice. They just jumped ahead. Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. Tom stepped closer, putting a steady hand on her arm. You're not alone. They did something similar to the Sullivans last year. I opened my laptop on the tailgate of the truck. Come here, I said gently. They clustered around. Faces lined with frustration, suspicion, embarrassment. People who'd lived in fear of rules they didn't understand and penalties they never saw coming. I opened the folder I'd shown Judge Caldwell. Timestamps, dashcam frames, ledger screenshots, appeal denials generated before any appeal existed. This, I said, tapping one of the files, is what they were doing. Not to just me. To all of us. A collective breath went through the crowd. So we weren't imagining it, someone said. They really were rigging the system, another whispered. I nodded. They wanted compliance without explanation. Tow threats without appeals. Money without accountability. Behind us, a car door slammed. 3 board members, now the interim board, walked up nervously. None of them looked like they slept. The tallest cleared his throat. Mr. Turner. Neighbors. I'm here to inform you that as of this morning, the board has voted to remove Cynthia Hale from her position as president. Effective immediately. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. And Mark Tom asked. Suspended, the board member replied, pending full review of financial records. Someone in the back let out a single relieved laugh. Others clapped. One man exhaled so hard it sounded like a tire releasing air. I glanced at Elena, who had just arrived and was leaning against her car at the curb. She gave me a small nod, steady told you so, and walked over. You didn't just save your truck, Tom said, turning to me. You saved us. I wasn't sure what to say. For weeks, all I'd wanted was my truck back and a little peace. But, looking at these people, all of them carrying their own versions of the same problem, I felt something shift. Justice isn't loud, I said quietly. It's steady. Somewhere behind us, a child's bike bell rang. A dog barked down the street. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood sounded normal. Then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the HOA. A news alert lit up the screen. State Attorney General opens formal investigation into Maple Ridge HOA operations potential financial misconduct under review. The crowd fell silent as I read it aloud. Elena crossed her arms, satisfied. There it is, she said, the unraveling. And it had only just begun. 1 year later, the parking lot looked nothing like the place where they'd once tried to tow my truck. Now, it was full of families. Kids ran between sawhorses and tool benches holding scrapwood like treasure. The new Maple Ridge Community Workshop Center buzzed with the sound of drills' laughter and the soft knock of hammers tapping into place. Someone had hung a banner across the entrance grand opening built by the community. My old red truck sat parked right out front, polished and steady, the sunlight catching the chrome like it had something to say. Tom walked up beside me and gave a low whistle. All this because you didn't fold. I shook my head. All this because nobody should have had to. He clapped my shoulder once the way men our age do when words seem too soft. Still, he said you set the tone. Inside the workshop smelled like fresh-cut pine and warm coffee. A row of kids learned how to use levels and clamps from one of the carpenters who volunteered. Parents stood nearby, smiling in that tired, relieved way that only comes after a long year of rebuilding. On the bulletin board where the HOA once taped their stern warnings hung flyers for weekend classes, community builds, and neighborhood repair days. Someone had even pinned up an old photo of my truck being booted, a red X drawn across it with a marker. Thought you'd appreciate the symbolism, a resident said as she walked by. I laughed. Yeah, can't deny it. Near the back wall, the new board members stood at a small podium. When I approached, they straightened. Jack, the interim president, said we're making this official. She handed me a folded envelope. Inside was a single-page letter on HOA stationery. The seal looked the same as always, but the tone was nothing like the old days. Public Statement of Accountability. Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The first line read, "We apologize for the misconduct, financial misuse, and targeted enforcement carried out under former leadership. Your lawful challenge set the foundation for full reform." I closed the letter slowly. "Never thought I'd see this," I said. "You earned it," the president replied. And so did everyone here. Behind me, Elena appeared holding a tablet with a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. "Want to see something satisfying?" she asked. "Always." She turned it toward me. Compliance is back to normal. No midnight edits, no phantom notices, nothing moved without double signatures. And the freeze did exactly what it needed to. "You're telling me the system survived," I said. "It didn't just survive," Elena replied. "It's clean." We stepped outside again as a breeze carried the smell of fresh varnish out through the doorway. People filtered in and out of the workshop, laughter drifting across the lot. A younger neighbor approached, hands in his jean pockets. "You ever miss the quiet days?" he asked. Before all this happened, it caught me off guard. I looked at the truck, looked at the workshop, looked at the people rebuilding what they'd almost lost. "Quiet's not the same as peaceful," I said. "Back then we were quiet because nobody knew how to stand up." He nodded slowly. "Guess that's changed." "Yeah," I said, "it has." More families arrived. Someone turned on a small radio, the music low and bright. The truck gleamed behind me. Prop number 3 restored whole again, a reminder of how far things had fallen and how far they'd come back. Tom stepped up beside me a second time. "You know," he said, almost hesitant, "a lot of us think you carried more of this fight than you admit." I breathed in the warm air, thick with sawdust and sunlight. "I didn't win anything alone. But you didn't back down," he said. "That matters." I let the words settle. The community deserved that moment as much as I did. Then I said the thing I'd held on to all year, the truth of it steady in my chest. Finally. Someone fought back, and it held. Tom smiled. Damn right it did. The afternoon light shifted, stretching long shadows across the asphalt. Kids' laughter echoed between houses. Neighbors waved from porches. The place felt alive in a way I hadn't seen since moving in. I walked toward my truck. The door creaked the same familiar way it always had. When I pulled it shut, the sound felt like closure. The engine turned over with a deep, even rumble. They tried towing my truck. I said quietly, almost to myself, and my attorney froze their entire network. Elena leaned against the bumper, arms crossed, grinning. "Think they'll forget that any time soon?" "Not a chance," I said. And in the end, we took our whole community back. I eased the truck into gear. The workshop shrinking in the mirror behind me, but the feeling steady, earned unshakable stayed right where it belonged. The sun caught the chrome on my restored red truck as I passed the workshop's entrance where the community had posted the sealed order that once froze the HOA in its tracks. A year of steady rebuilding taught me that power bends when people finally stand up together, and the plaque on the wall proves we didn't imagine the fight we lived through. I learned that order, truth, and a little grit will outlast any bad rule written in the dark. Finally, someone fought back. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.